The U.S. president's former personal attorney says that Donald Trump ordered him to make 500 threats to different individuals or entities over a decade time.
How many times did Mr. Trump ask you to threaten an individual or entity on his behalf?
Quite a few times.
50 times?
More.
100 times?
More.
200 times?
More.
500 times?
Probably. Over the 10 years.
Over the 10 years, he asked you.
Michael Cohen made the remarks while testifying before the U.S. House of Representatives Oversight Committee. Cohen described Trump as a boss who's intoxicating and deeply flawed. Cohen lamented what he called his misplaced loyalty to Trump and said he's ashamed of concealing the U.S. president's illicit acts. He said the president called African Americans too stupid to vote for him in the 2016 presidential election. Cohen said Donald Trump's presence in Vietnam was ironic, as the president had forged medical records to defer his Vietnam War draft. Trump has rejected Cohen's accounts, said his former lawyer is lying to reduce his upcoming prison term. And now joining us for this segment of our news review is Colin Campbell, PressTV correspondent out of Washington, D.C., and Jason Unruhe, political commentator, joining us out of Ontario, Canada. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you both for joining us. If I could swing over to you first, Colin, give us the latest. I mean, that was probably one of the longest hearings, testimonies, whatever you want to call it, I've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, it was, and we saw some fireworks on the Hill, didn't we? This is something that a lot of people have anticipated, especially House Democrats, who really wanted to get to the bottom of what might be viewed as malfeasance on behalf of the Trump administration and the president himself. There were those who were anticipating comments and questions from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representing the very part of the Democratic Party, but also who asked some very pertinent questions about the president's his tax objectives and his tax engagement, which indicates that he may have committed some type of tax fraud. This, of course, would then prompt House investigators to look further into Trump's tax records. Of course, this was something that they had already talked about, but now the relevance of doing so and the necessity to do so is even more apparent after the questioning on the Hill. What we saw from Republicans was very combative, looking to discredit Cohen at every turn. Many of their questions focusing on the possible money-making potential that Cohen would have over any type of salacious stories regarding President Donald Trump. They talked about potential book deals. They talked about potential film deals. They talked about any kind of money that he could make from being Trump's personal fixer, his personal attorney, and knowing where the bodies are buried, where the skeletons are in the closet. And of course, Democrats took another approach, really trying to connect the relationship that Cohen had with the president and any type of political malfeasance. And so we had this very back and forth on the Hill. It was very elucidating. It did create some theatrics, which I think gripped a lot of people here in Washington, D.C. They made it a social event where you could go to a bar and get a drink or get food for a discount price to watch what was happening as this testimony unfolded. So a lot of people gripped to their television sets. I saw some people praying for the president as they were hoping that nothing would be too damaging that is exposed that would hurt his presidency. And then, of course, I saw people praying for Cohen, saying that he has indeed redeemed himself. If we remember, Cohen was a person who did lie to Congress. He's a person who has not told the truth on many occasions, but someone who was looking to redeem himself in front of the public, the court of public opinion. And many people feel that he did so today on the Hill as he talked about his wrongdoings, his foibles, but also some of the criminal, what he describes as criminal activity on behalf of President Donald Trump.
And if I could, Jason, swing over to you now. And Colin just mentioned, here's a guy that's actually going to jail for lying to Congress, one of a few charges against him. So how much do you think his testimony today will go towards hurting the U.S. president?
I think it might be very, very significant. There was some very damaging information that has come out, not just the usual things about his personality that are generally already known, the fact that he is very racist, etc., but much of the conduct that he has carried out behind the scenes, maybe not just as president, but before then. I think that there's a great deal of criminality if everything that is said by Cohen is true, and we would tend to think that it probably is. I think that much of this will reflect very heavily upon him in the circles that already don't approve. I think there's always going to be that very core demographic that's probably going to support the president no matter what, and will call Cohen a liar no matter what he says or however much proof comes out as a result. But I think in terms of information coming out that can be used in a legal case against him, not just for tax evasion, but for possibly even removing him as president, this is going to be very significant. And in those halls, in those circles, in those hearings, this is going to be very damaging. This is going to show a president that should never have been in office, one that was never fit for the job, and one that shouldn't be carrying out the task of negotiations with the leader of the DPRK right now. And I think that to some degree, from the people who are more to the center or are not so attached to Trump personally as supporters, they may be swayed very heavily by this as well.
If you gentlemen, just let me get a soundbite out to our viewers. Now, during the testimony, Michael Cohen also described the U.S. President Donald Trump as a racist, a con man, and fundamentally disloyal. Let's have a listen.
Mr. Trump is a racist. The country has seen Mr. Trump court white supremacists and bigots. You have heard him call poorer countries shitholes. In private, he is even worse. He once asked me if I could name a country run by a black person that wasn't a shithole. This was when Barack Obama was president of the United States. Mr. Trump is a con man. He asked me to pay off an adult film star with whom he had an affair and to lie about it to his wife, which I did. He is capable of behaving kindly, but he is not kind. He is capable of committing acts of generosity, but he is not generous. He is capable of being loyal, but he is fundamentally disloyal. I did things and I acted improperly, at times at Mr. Trump's behest. I blindly followed his demands. My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything. My family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power.
Now we're going to swing back to our guest now. Now, Colin, aside from the character flaws, that's not going to get a sitting president kicked out of office. But guess what? We know at the same time that Cohen is also cooperating with prosecutors on a case that could be very damaging to Trump, isn't he?
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about before when I was talking about where the bodies are buried. Listen, as Trump's personal attorney and his personal fixer, he knows a lot of the machinations behind the Trump machine, where he may have hid money, where he has tax havens, where he might have committed some type of fraud, where he proclaimed that he had less assets than he actually did so he could receive a tax rebate. He talked about all of this on the Hill today, which again necessitates the need for them to subpoena tax records. Of course, as we remember, when the president was campaigning, people asked him if he was going to release his tax records. He said, when I'm done with the audit. That was a constant refrain. Almost as many times as we heard no collusion, we heard that he was waiting for a tax audit before he could release his taxes. Maybe we heard about no collusion even more. However, he did say it a lot, and he still says that. The reason why he hasn't produced his tax records is because of this audit. Well, now there seems to be more pressure on the House to get those tax records and analyze them. for any type of wrongdoing, any type of tax fraud. And I think that's where the chair, Elijah Cummings, Representative Elijah Cummings, talked about how there could be, or there is, an indication that fraud was committed. This could be something that could definitely get the president out of office. I'm not going to speak to the political expediency of that. I don't know if that, again, because I don't know if that's what people really want or if that would be good for the country or not. But I will say this does indicate that the president may have committed a crime, and that would definitely be an impeachable offense. So you have those who have already championed for the president's impeachment. Others said that they should wait for more evidence. I have a feeling that if these tax records are subpoenaed and what Cohen testified on the Hill today matches what is in those records, this could be something that would be an historic event in the U.S. where some people would push for the impeachment of the 45th president of the United States.
Thank you, Colin. And we don't have a lot of time there, Jason, but really quick, how much were you affected by, I mean, how believable, first of all, was Cohen's testimony, in your opinion, today? And how much do you think it's going to impact other people's interpretation or impression of the U.S. president?
I think this information that's been brought out confirms a lot of things that people who already don't like the president or opposed to him are already in belief of. So I don't think that will change much in that regard. To the people who support him very much so without criticism, to blindly follow him, I don't think it will have any effect whatsoever. I think many of them will see him as a man with nothing left to lose, or perhaps trying to pander to a what they perceive to be a Democratic-controlled judiciary, looking for some kind of leniency if they attack the president enough. But I think that this will have more of an effect on people who are probably closer to the fence, people who probably support him but are also very critical of him. I think that this will have more of an effect. But I do think that a lot of people may see this as sour grapes. Some of them may see this as just pandering to the judiciary. After all, Cohen did do all these things, not particularly out of loyalty to Trump, but because it was his job. He was paid to do so. And I think that while Cohen may not be a man without any kind of a conscience, he may genuinely feel sorry for some of the things that he's done. But it is interesting coming from the person who actually committed the acts themselves. And I think that this will have an effect to some degree on the public perception of the president, and will definitely play out in court.
Thanks both of you gentlemen for joining us on this extended conversation on our news review. Colin Campbell out of Washington, D.C., and Jason Unruhe joining us out of Ontario. And for our viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your news review. Thanks for joining us, and bye-bye.